Tuesday, 1887. Wayfarer, Kansas Territory. The blue lantern bled lamplight into the dust, while men shouted like coyotes at a kill. A girl in a thin white dress stood on a wooden platform, knuckles white around a frayed rope. The room smelled of whiskey, iron, and hot breath. Coins clinked like teeth. A gavel cracked the smoke. Her name was Clara Wynne, and every eye in the saloon climbed her, like a ladder. Near the doorway, a tall black rancher paused, dust on his hat brim and a storm in his chest. He was remembering something he hadn't let himself remember in a long time. Ezek Pike raised the gavel again, smiling with the kind of mouth that never learned to be sorry. Gentlemen, 19, unspoiled, and in debt. Start at 50. 50 came like spit on the floor. 60, 70. Numbers thrown like stones at a tin can, just to hear the ring. Clara held still, the way a hurt animal holds still, so the hurt won't notice it as much. A blue ribbon hung at her wrist to hide the rope marks. It didn't hide much. Rusk Harlan leaned against the bar, boots polished cruel, smile thin as a blade. 100, he said. The crowd shifted toward him, the way wheat leans toward wind. Near the bat wings, Malachi Gray didn't move for a breath. He had come for salt, nails, maybe seed, if the price was kind, and to leave before the town remembered anything about him it didn't like. He saw Clara's eyes. Not pretty first, just scared, and still trying to be brave. The ribbon at her wrist was the same clean blue he had once tied around a handkerchief for Eliza when the church fair needed color. That thought stepped out of the past and stood where he couldn't avoid it. 90, someone rasped, drunk and eager to clean his sin with a bargain. Rusk didn't even look. 100, he said again, louder. Because a man like him believed echo was proof. The lamp nearest the platform hissed and settled. Pike's gavel hovered, waiting for the last decent thing in the room to die. Malachi stepped forward, boots slow, hands open. He set his hat brim back so men could see his face, and he could see theirs. I'll pay 200. The words were simple and heavy. They fell through the room like a beam laid over a washout. Someone laughed, then swallowed it wrong. 200 was winter, and seed, and medicine. A year's sweat. It was also the only thing left between Clara and the blank place beyond her. Do I hear 210? Pike called, smiling brighter. Nobody answered. Rusk's jaw worked once. Men shifted, not sure which way the wind blew now that it smelled like shame. Clara looked at Malachi as if she'd found water and was still afraid to drink. He didn't look back long. A man can drown in another person's need if he stares too hard at it. He counted bills into Pike's hand. Notes softened by years in a breast pocket, warmed by a body that would miss them. The crowd watched the money like crows watch a bright thing. Sold. The gavel came down as if it meant to break more than wood. Clara didn't move. Her knees had learned to lock, and learning works slow to leave. Malachi came to the edge of the platform, not reaching, not crowding. "Miss Wynne," he said, voice low, steady, like water against a trough. "You're safe from them. I have a small place, food, a clean bed, and no debt you have to pay with your life. That's all I mean." She searched his face the way a hand searches in the dark for the doorframe. "You're not—" The word stuck. He shook his head once. Relief crossed her features quick as a bird's shadow, and was gone. They turned to the doorway together. The room parted slow. Rusk stepped off the bar, lazy as a rattler. Men near him made a narrow V without being asked. Sheriff Boone Keller stood by the posts, hat low, mouth quiet. Too quiet, for a man whose job was law. Malachi felt that quiet in his bones, and didn't like the shape of it. "200 for charity," Rusk said, voice almost sweet. "Seems you bought more than supper and an extra plate, Gray." "Seems you ruined a town's name for less," Malachi said. Not unkind, not loud. He put his body between Clara and the room, without making a show of it. He had spent enough life learning how to be a wall no one noticed, until they ran into it. Outside, afternoon hung bright and thin, the kind of light that forgives nothing. Clara's ribbon flashed blue when she climbed down and smoothed her dress. Malachi saw it again, and felt Eliza's laugh cross the years, soft, surprised, full of summer. He put that memory back where it belonged, and shut the lid gently. "Walk," he murmured. They did, boots on warped boards. The crowd stepped aside, unwilling to touch what might burn. Keller's eyes flicked to Rusk, then to the money in Pike's fist, then away. Malachi filed that away with other facts that later become decisions. At the threshold, Clara's breath hitched. She looked at the street the way a deer looks at a creek in drought, suspicious of anything that shines. The hitching rail waited. His mare pawed once like she was listening too. Malachi offered his hand and kept it there, steady as a fence post. She didn't take it. She didn't need to. She found the step with her own foot, and the ground held. Behind them chairs scraped. The sound of spurs came slow and careful, as if the man wearing them wanted the noise to be counted. Malachi didn't turn. He felt the air lean backward, the way air leans when trouble stands up. "Name," Rusk said softly, just loud enough to carry through the door and into the day, "so I can send a thank you when I come calling." Malachi tightened the cinch. The leather whispered home. He lifted Clara to the saddle like she weighed as much as the truth. He swung up behind, one hand on the reins, the other near nothing that could be mistaken for a weapon. The sun laid a long stripe of gold across Main Street, clean as a line on a ledger. He looked over his shoulder, past the bat wings, into the dim where Pike's teeth shone and Keller's hat brim hid his eyes. "Malachi Gray," he said, "and I'll be taking Miss Wynne home now." The street went silent in a way that carries. Somewhere, a dog barked once, then stopped, as if it had remembered something. The mare shifted, ready. Clara's fingers touched her blue ribbon, like a prayer she hadn't learned the words to yet. On the boardwalk, Rusk smiled without heat and tipped his glass. "Road's long to your place," he said, "and the light dies early." They rode forward, into that light, before it did. Tuesday bled into evening, the color of copper and smoke. The wind down Main Street carried the sound of boots and shame, soft, uneven, fading. Inside the blue lantern, men turned back to their whiskey, pretending the room had not just seen something worth remembering. Malachi Gray guided the mare through the narrow street, one hand steady on the reins, the other resting near Clara's shoulder. Though he never touched her, she sat stiff in front of him, trembling, as if the air itself could bruise her. The dust lifted around them like ghosts that didn't want to settle. "You can breathe now," he said quietly. "I don't think I remember how," she answered, voice thin as paper. The road stretched toward the western ridge, where the sun hung low, like a dying ember. Each hoofbeat sounded, like a clock running out. Behind them, the blue lantern's door banged open. Malachi didn't look back. He didn't have to. He knew the rhythm of that man's boots. Rusk Harlan was not the kind who let anything end quietly. At the edge of town, Malachi stopped. He pulled the reins and turned the mare sideways to the light. "Miss Wynne," he said, keeping his eyes on the horizon, "that money I gave, don't think of it as a price. It's just a way to get you out of that room." She turned to look at him, startled. "You mean, I owe you nothing?" He shook his head. "No one owes for being saved. That's not saving. That's trading." For a moment she said nothing. Then, with both hands, she unknotted the blue ribbon from her wrist. The skin beneath it was raw, angry red, the mark of rope and humiliation. She tried to hide it again, but Malachi caught the edge of her movement. "Don't," he said gently. "Let the wind touch it. It'll heal faster." She looked at him. Really looked this time. He was darker than the land, face lined by sun and grief, his eyes deep enough to hide a life. There was quiet strength there, the kind that doesn't announce itself. "You speak like a preacher," she said softly. He smiled once without humor. "Used to be a man worth listening to taught me that words mean nothing unless you live them." They rode again. The prairie opened wide, dry grass rippling under the dying light. Every so often, Clara glanced over her shoulder, expecting riders. Malachi noticed, but said nothing. A woman who'd lived in fear didn't unlearn it by comfort. The road curved past the old cottonwoods, where the creek once ran full. Malachi slowed the mare, eyes sweeping the ridge. Something moved, small, distant, but he didn't draw. He wasn't a man who reached for iron first. "You think he'll come after us?" she asked. "Rusk Harlan doesn't like to lose," Malachi said. "But he likes witnesses even less. For now, we're safe." She drew her knees up slightly, steadying her balance. And the sheriff? He saw everything. Malachi's jaw tightened. That's the part that worries me. They reached the split in the road where the lantern trail met the pasture tracks. Night had started to climb from the earth up, not down from the sky. The first stars blinked pale and watchful. Clara's voice broke the silence. Why did you do it? Why me? Malachi's answer came slow. Because there was a time. Someone should have done it for mine. The way he said it left no room for questions. The words carried weight that didn't need explanation. The wind took them, folded them somewhere safe. When they reached the ridge crest, the town lights were just smudges behind them. Malachi dismounted and helped Clara down. His hand hovered near hers, but never closed. We'll rest here a while, he said. Then it's another 6 miles to my place. She nodded, gathering her skirt. The ribbon slipped from her fingers and fell into the dust. Before she could pick it up, he knelt and brushed the dirt from it carefully. Keep it, he said, handing it back. A thing's worth isn't in where it's been, but what it survives. Her throat worked once. No sound came out. She took it. The ribbon fluttered against her palm, like something learning to breathe again. From far behind, across the valley, came the faint clatter of hooves. It might have been an echo, or it might have been Rusk Harlan, beginning the hunt he'd promised with his eyes. Malachi turned toward the sound, a faint line of tension running through his shoulders. We ride before moonrise, he said quietly. The road. Home's long, and men like him don't sleep when they're shamed. Clara looked up at him, the fear still there, but softer now, shaped by trust she didn't know how to name. Will your home really be safe? He tightened the saddle strap, glanced toward the dark horizon. Safer than that room. She nodded. Then I'll follow. He helped her mount, his touch steady, respectful. The mare snorted once, eager to move. Malachi swung up behind her, the smell of dust and iron filling the night. As they started west, a single lantern in the distance blinked twice, then went out. And somewhere behind them, a man's voice carried on the wind, low and promising. $200 buys a lot of trouble, Gray. They didn't look back. The land swallowed the sound, but not the meaning. The road west of Wayfarer cut through wheat stubble and dry wind. By nightfall, the sky turned black and silver, the kind of sky that made a man remember how small he was. The mare moved steady beneath them, her breath showing faint in the cooling air. Behind, the town shrank to a dull glow, and then disappeared entirely. Clara kept her hands folded tight in her lap. Every sound made her shoulders flinch, the rustle of grass, the snap of a grasshopper's wing, the creak of saddle leather. Malachi rode quiet, watching the line where the prairie met the dark. You should rest, he said after a long while. I can't, she whispered. If I close my eyes, I'll see their faces. He nodded. Then we'll keep moving, till the light breaks. The wagon track narrowed between low ridges, where the sage grew thick and the air smelled of dust and old rain. Somewhere out there, a coyote called, and another answered from far off, thin as sorrow. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My place is called Hollow Vale," he said. "Small farm, 2 horses, 3 cows, a roof that leaks when it wants to. But it's quiet." She turned a little in the saddle. "Quiet sounds strange." He smiled faintly. "You'll get used to it." Silence folded around them again, broken only by the mare's hooves. After a while, she said, "You didn't have to help me." "I know." "Then why?" Malachi drew a slow breath. "Because the last time I didn't, someone died." She looked back at him, startled, but he didn't explain. The stars above them burned sharp and cold, and she let the question fall away, like ash. A little after midnight, they reached the fork where the road split. One path toward the river, another climbing the ridge toward Malachi's land. He stopped the horse, scanning the horizon. Somewhere behind them, far enough to doubt, but close enough to fear, came the faint rattle of hooves. "You hear that?" she asked. He nodded once. "Wind carries strange at night. Could be nothing." But the way his hand hovered near the saddle horn said he didn't believe that. They turned up the ridge, the path narrowing between rock and scrub. The moon came out, for a moment, pale and watchful, lighting the dust on Clara's sleeve, and the blue ribbon knotted again at her wrist. She'd tied it back without thinking, the way a woman might put a hand over her own heartbeat. "I used to keep accounts," she said suddenly, "at Pike's saloon. That's how I got in debt." He looked at her. "You mean he kept you there?" "No, he said my father owed him. He showed me the book, columns and figures. But there were 2 ledgers. One for what was real, one for what he made up. I think I could prove it if I saw them again." Malachi didn't answer right away. The wind shifted, carrying a dry whisper through the brush. "That's something to hold on to," he said finally. "Truth always finds its place." She looked at him, confused. "You believe that?" "I have to," he said. "It's all I've got left." They crested the ridge. From there, the land fell away into a shallow valley, dark and quiet except for the soft hiss of grass. Below, a small cabin sat against the slope, smoke from its chimney curling like breath. "That's your home?" she asked. He nodded. "Since before the fire." "What fire?" He didn't answer. The wind rose again, brushing the dust from his coat, carrying the faint scent of something long gone, charred wood, lamp oil, rain that never came. Clara didn't press. Some griefs weren't meant to be touched. The first night. The mare started down the last stretch slow, her hooves thudding soft on packed earth. At the bottom of the hill, Malachi swung down and tied her to the post. He offered Clara his hand again. This time, she took it. Her fingers were cold, but she held tight. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of cedar and coffee. A single lamp burned on the table. The walls were plain, the furniture worn smooth from use, but there was order to the place. Tools hung straight, boots lined by the door, a folded quilt on the chair. Malachi set a kettle on the stove. There's bread and water on the shelf. Take what you need. Clara sat, shoulders drawn, eyes darting like a bird that hadn't learned yet. The cage was gone. Where should I sleep? Anywhere you can breathe easy, he said. No locks on the doors here. Her gaze flicked to the window, where the curtains stirred gently with the wind. For the first time in years, she realized no one was standing outside, waiting for her to fail. Malachi poured 2 tin cups of coffee. He slid one toward her, his hand steady. Tomorrow, we'll talk about what comes next. She nodded, voice small. Tomorrow, she said, as if the word itself was a fragile thing. Outside, the night deepened. Somewhere far off, that sound again. Hooves, faint but certain, threading through the dark like a promise. Malachi set his cup down slowly, listening. Get some rest, he said. But neither of them slept. Dawn came slow over Hollow Vale, the kind of light that didn't rush anyone. The hills wore a skin of mist, pale and thin, and the world smelled of dust and wet cedar. Clara woke to the creak of boards and the soft scrape of metal. A man fixing something, because fixing was easier than sleeping. Malachi stood by the porch rail, sleeves rolled, hammer moving steady. He didn't look up when she stepped outside. The air between them was fragile, as if words might break it. I didn't mean to wake you, he said. You didn't. She held her arms close, eyes searching the valley. It stretched wide and empty, no fences, no riders. It's quiet. That's the point. She hesitated. It feels strange. He half smiled. You'll get used to strange. Inside, the cabin smelled of bread and coffee. On the table sat a tin plate, a folded towel, and a small knife glinting in the early light. Clara froze, unsure if it was invitation or warning. Malachi noticed. You can use that for the bread, he said, or keep it by your bed, if it helps you sleep. Her fingers hovered over the handle. You'd let me? He nodded. You been told you couldn't? Always. The knife was dull, but it was freedom enough. She set it beside her plate and ate slow, like she was testing the safety of the air. Malachi moved about the room, quiet, deliberate. He poured water into a basin, pushed it toward her. You can wash. There's more by the well. Why are you kind to me? She asked suddenly. He looked at her for a long moment. Because kindness shouldn't be rare. They didn't speak after that. The silence was thick, but not cruel. Outside, the mare nickered. A hawk cut across the sun. When Clara finished, she wandered to the door. The fields rolled out toward the horizon, wild and open. Her throat tightened. Freedom, after too long, could hurt worse than a cage. You can walk as far as you like, Malachi said behind her. No fences, no locks. She turned. Why no locks? Because a man who locks his door is afraid of the world. I've had enough fear for one life. His voice was calm, but something dark moved under it. She saw the edge of old hurt there, the kind that doesn't fade, only folds itself quieter. She nodded. Maybe I'll try walking. He watched her cross the yard, her skirt brushing the dry grass. When she reached the well, she paused, looking back once. He raised a hand in a half wave, and she answered with a faint nod. The sun climbed higher, laying gold over the valley. Malachi went back to mending the rail, the rhythm of the hammer steadying him. Each strike was a small promise that the place would hold, that she'd have something solid under her feet. From the ridge above the creek, a hawk screamed once and lifted into the blue. Its cry echoed down the slope, sharp enough to raise the hair on a man's neck. Malachi turned, scanning the distance. On the far rise, just for a heartbeat, he thought he saw movement, a shimmer of metal, a figure on horseback. Then it was gone. When Clara came back, her hands were wet, hair loose from its pins. She looked almost unburdened. Almost. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For not asking where I came from. He set the hammer down. You'll tell me when you need to. That was enough. The afternoon burned clean and dry. He showed her the barn, the small pen, the smokehouse still standing from before the fire. She listened more than she spoke, memorizing the lines of the place, as if knowing its map might anchor her. By dusk, clouds gathered low, promising rain they wouldn't keep. Clara sat on the porch steps, stitching her torn sleeve. Malachi leaned in the doorway, watching the storm hesitate. I used to think quiet meant safety, she said. But sometimes it feels like waiting. He nodded slowly. Sometimes it is. The wind shifted, carrying a faint sound through the valley. Hoofbeats, far off, too regular to be wild. Malachi's head turned, his jaw tightening. Is it him? She whispered. He listened, eyes narrowing. Could be nothing. The mare stamped once, restless. The wind brought the smell of smoke, faint but wrong. Malachi set the hammer down, his voice calm but firm. Time 600s. Stay inside, Clara. Bolt the window. I'll see who's come calling. She hesitated, fingers gripping the doorframe. You said there were no locks. He met her eyes, quiet, steady. There are now. The first drops came slow, fat, and cold, thudding against the porch roof like knuckles on a coffin. The valley filled with that strange hush that comes before rain truly starts. Malachi stood on the steps, hat low, eyes fixed on the dark slope beyond the fence line. Somewhere out there, the faint glow of a cigar flared, then died. He turned the lantern wick down and stepped inside. The room was dim, the air thick with the smell of damp wood and something quieter. Fear, maybe, or memory. Clara sat by the hearth, knees drawn up, mending her torn sleeve with careful stitches that didn't quite meet. The knife he'd given her lay within reach, its edge catching the firelight. "You saw something," she said. "Could be riders," he answered. "Could be nothing but my nerves. Men like Rusk don't stay nothing for long." He nodded, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "That's what I'm afraid of." The wind blew the door open a crack, and the lamp flame leaned hard, thin as a whisper. Malachi crossed the room and set the bolt. "Storm's close," he murmured. "Does it always come like this here?" "Sometimes worse." He poured water into a tin pot and set it by the fire. When it boiled, he added dried leaves from a small jar. "Tea," he said, "for sleep, if you can manage it." Clara watched him move. He did everything with quiet precision, as if noise itself might break something fragile inside him. "You've done this before," she said. "What?" "Taking care of someone scared." He paused, then gave a small nod. "Once." She waited, but he didn't go on. The rain started in earnest, rattling the roof. Shadows swayed along the walls. "My wife, Eliza," he said finally, voice low. "She used to sit where you are. Used to say storms made her feel small enough to pray." "What happened to her?" His hand stilled on the kettle handle. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain. "The fire," he said, "started in town. They said it was an accident. It wasn't." Clara looked down, her throat tightening. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Don't be. Sorry doesn't change the wind." The rain grew harder, turning the roof into a drum. Lightning flashed once, white and clean, lighting the fear on her face. He saw it and understood it. The way people who've known loss recognize each other, without words. "You're safe here," he said softly. "I don't even know what that means anymore." "It means nobody decides what happens to you, but you." She wanted to believe him. Maybe she even did. A little. He moved to the window, lifted the curtain with 2 fingers. Through the glass, the rain came sideways, but between flashes of lightning, he caught sight of something darker against the trees. A horse's flank, still as stone. He let the curtain fall. "Get away from the window," he said quietly. "Is it them?" "Could be," he murmured. "Could be somebody testing luck." He crossed the room, grabbed his coat from the peg, and took the rifle from above the door. The motion was calm, practiced, nothing like panic. Clara stood, her breath short. "Please don't go out there," she said. "If it's him." He looked at her, steady, unreadable. "If it's him, he'll know we're not afraid." She reached for him, then stopped. You could get killed. Malachi's eyes softened, and for the first time she saw the grief under them. Years of it, layered and quiet. I already did once, he said, when I didn't move fast enough to save someone else. He opened the door. The wind hit him hard, carrying rain and the faint smell of smoke. He stepped out onto the porch, boots splashing in mud. Clara stood in the doorway, lamplight behind her, blue ribbon loose at her wrist. A single gunshot cracked across the valley. The echo rolled off the hills, then died. Malachi didn't move. He waited, listening to the space after the sound. The kind of silence that tells you more than words ever could. Then came another flash of lightning, and for an instant he saw them. Two riders at the far edge of the pasture, motionless in the rain, watching. One held a lantern low, the light flickering on metal, and hate. He lowered the rifle, but didn't raise it. Violence only fed the fire that had already taken too much. He turned, meeting Clara's eyes through the rain. "Pack your, things," he said. "At first light, we leave." She nodded, mouth trembling. "Where will we go?" "Someplace. The wind forgets our names." Thunder rolled across the sky, close enough to shake the porch. Malachi stepped back inside and shut the door. The latch clicked softly, a sound that felt final, like a prayer sealing itself shut. Outside, the rain swallowed the tracks of the men who'd come to watch. Morning broke thin and gray, a light that felt borrowed from another sky. The storm had left the world clean and uneasy. Mud clung to the mare's hooves as Malachi saddled her, jaw set tight. Clara stood on the porch with her bundle of clothes and the blue ribbon tied around her wrist again. A nervous habit now, something to hold the pieces together. "Eat first," he said, handing her a piece of bread. "I'm not hungry." "Then chew anyway. Fear burns quicker than fire." She managed half a smile, then took a bite. He watched her like a man memorizing a face before the next fight. When the mare stamped and blew, he looked to the ridge. The horizon wavered with heat, but no smoke rose. Still, he could feel it, the air waiting for something. They left Hollow Vale before the sun cleared the hills. The trail wound north through limestone canyons, narrow and dry, the kind of place sound could hide and wait. Every few miles, Malachi dismounted, checking the tracks behind them. The earth was soft. They weren't alone. "Whoever's following doesn't ride light," he muttered. Clara glanced back. "It's him." "Maybe." He tightened the cinch. "Maybe not yet." They rode in silence. The land opened to a basin of cracked rock where an old sign leaned half-buried. "Goat Skull Pass." A warning, or a promise. The canyon walls narrowed, turning sound into echoes. The mare's breathing came quick. Clara broke the quiet. "You ever killed a man?" Malachi didn't look at her. "Only in memory." "Then why bring a gun?" in case memory comes riding back. She swallowed hard. If he finds us, he will, he said, scanning the cliffs, but maybe not here. A hawk circled overhead, its cry sharp against the emptiness. He dismounted, lifted Clara down. Stay low, he said. The pass is a trap, if you ride it blind. They moved along the rock, their steps muffled by dust. The wind carried faint voices from behind, the careless laughter of men who thought they'd already won. Malachi crouched by the bend, motioning for silence. 3 riders appeared on the far ridge, guns slung low. Behind them, 2 more led spare horses. One wore a red bandana, Rusk's mark. They've split up, Malachi said under his breath, trying to box us in. Clara's hand trembled. What do we do? We wait, till they choose which side of the canyon they like better. He found a ledge halfway up the wall and pulled her beside him. They crouched in the shade, the air dry as bone. Below, the riders drew closer, their voices bouncing off the stone. You think he's still got the girl? One called. Rusk's voice answered, slow and sure. He's got her. A man like Gray don't throw away what he pays for. Clara flinched at the words. Malachi's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He waited until the horses' hooves echoed directly beneath them, then whispered, Hold your breath. The wind shifted, blowing dust into the canyon like smoke. For a moment, it hid everything. When it cleared, the riders had passed. Malachi exhaled slow, shoulders easing, just enough to hurt. We'll cut east, he said. There's an old trail along the creek bed. If we're lucky, they'll think we went west. What if they don't? He looked at her then. Eyes calm, dark as river silt. Then we keep moving anyway. They descended the far side, sliding through loose gravel. The mare followed, snorting softly. Clara stumbled once, and he caught her by the elbow. Her hand brushed his chest, felt the steady thud of his heart beneath the sweat and dust. For the first time since Wayfarer, she didn't pull away. At the base of the canyon, they found the dry creek, a ribbon of pale sand twisting through stone. Malachi knelt, pressing his palm to the ground. Damp underneath, he murmured. Means water close. Good sign. Good for them too, she said. He smiled faintly. You learn quick. They followed the creek until the walls widened again. Above them, thunder muttered. Though the sky was clear, the sound wasn't thunder at all. It was hoofbeats, distant, deliberate. Malachi turned to her. Go. Stay close to the rocks. What about you? I'll make them count wrong. He stepped into the open, rifle slung low but not raised. From the ridge, Rusk's voice came again, smug and steady. Thought you could hide in. My hills, Gray? Malachi called back. They stopped being yours when you sold your soul to buy them. Big words for a man with nowhere left to go. The canyon swallowed the echo, holding it like breath. Malachi's eyes flicked toward the east, toward where Clara would be, if she obeyed. He spoke loud enough for her to hear, though his gaze never left Rusk. Tell your men to leave the girl. You want debt. Take it up with me. Rusk laughed, cruel and easy. You ain't worth a bullet, Gray. But the girl, she'll fetch more than the money you threw away. Malachi's hand tightened around the rifle stock. He could feel the old rage rise, hot and useless, but he swallowed it. Eliza's voice came back to him, like a ghost in prayer. Don't let hate speak for you. He took one slow breath, then another. You'll answer for what you did in that saloon, he said. Not to me, to the law. The law, Rusk spat. Law's a man I drink with on Sundays. Malachi's eyes shifted to the ridge behind him. Two riders appeared. Reverend North and old Tom Wicks from town, rifles ready. Maybe he switched churches, Malachi said. For a long heartbeat, no one moved. Then Rusk barked, "Fall back!" And the canyon echoed with the clatter of hooves retreating up the slope. Dust settled, slow and soft. Malachi lowered the rifle. The Reverend climbed down first, breath ragged. We figured you might need company, he said. You picked a bad road, son. Wasn't my road to start with, Malachi answered. Clara stepped from the rocks, eyes wide. When she saw the Reverend, relief broke through her fear. Malachi turned to her, voice low. You all right? She nodded, though her hands shook. What now? He looked up the pass, where the sound of hooves was fading, but not gone. Now, he said, we take the truth back to town and see if it's worth more than bullets. Behind them, the wind moved through the canyon, carrying the smell of rain again. Night came early to Wayfarer that evening, the kind of dark that seemed to hold its breath. The lamps in the saloon windows flickered weak, painting the mud street in gold and shadow. Inside the church office, Malachi leaned over the rough table, tracing a map Reverend North had drawn in ink, and worry. Blue lanterns where Pike keeps his books, the Reverend said. 2 ledgers, just like the girl told you. One real, one for lies. Clara sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a tin cup gone cold. The ribbon on her wrist had faded, frayed from the journey. She stared at it, as though the color itself might keep her brave. If we can prove those debts were forged, she said quietly, Rusk loses the only leash he ever had on me. Malachi looked up. You sure you can find it? I wrote half those entries myself, she said. He thought I was too stupid to remember numbers. He nodded. Then we go tonight. Reverend North frowned. At night? Pike's a dangerous man. Malachi smiled without humor. So's daylight when you're hunted. The Reverend sighed. You'll need someone to watch the street. No, Malachi said. The fewer souls involved, the safer they stay. He stood, adjusted his coat, and offered Clara his hand. You said you know where it's hidden. Lead the way. They slipped out through the back, moving through the narrow alleys behind the mercantile. The wind carried the smell of spilled whiskey and lamp oil. Malachi kept his head down, hat low, shadow swallowing half his face. The blue lantern sat at the edge of town, its windows dark for once. A horse snorted near the hitching post, tethered but restless. Clara froze. "That's Pike's mare," she whispered. "Then he's home," Malachi murmured. "We'll be quiet." They crept along the side wall, where the mud bricks turned cool and damp. Malachi's hand brushed the revolver at his hip, not from intent, but instinct. He found the back door unlatched. Inside, the air was thick with stale tobacco and spilled ale. The room remembered too much cruelty. The auction platform still stood near the bar, now draped with a torn curtain. Clara's breath hitched when she saw it. Time £800. "Don't look there," Malachi whispered. "Look forward." They moved through the shadows to Pike's office, a small room behind the bar, walls lined with shelves and ledgers. On the desk sat a single oil lamp, burning low. And beside it, Ezek Pike himself, half drunk, half asleep, gun resting in his lap. Clara froze in the doorway. Malachi motioned her behind him, stepping in slow. The floorboard creaked once, too loud. Pike stirred, mumbling something about debts. Then he opened his eyes. "Well," he rasped, voice thick, "I thought you'd run farther, girl." Clara stiffened. Malachi didn't move, didn't blink. "You've got a choice," Pike said, leaning back. "You can walk out now, or you can watch him die like all the others who thought they could rewrite my books." Malachi's voice was calm. "Then maybe you should tell the truth, before someone else writes it for you." Pike's eyes flicked toward the drawer behind him, small, locked brass key dangling from a chain around his neck. Clara saw it too. She took one slow step forward. "Ezek," she said softly, "you remember my mother's birthday?" He frowned. "What?" "It was the password you made me use, for the false account." She moved closer, voice trembling but clear. "May the 12th, 1868. Malachi caught the shift in Pike's face, recognition, then panic. He lunged for the drawer, but Malachi was faster. His hand came down on Pike's wrist, pinning it to the desk. "Enough," Malachi said, low and steady. "You'll open it, and you'll let her end this." For a long second, the room was all breath and heartbeats. Then Pike exhaled through his teeth. "You think she can read the truth out of that book?" "She doesn't have to," Malachi said. "The ink will speak for her." Pike's hand trembled as he turned the key. The drawer slid open. 2 ledgers lay inside. One new, one old, bound in cracked leather. Clara reached for the older one. Inside, her neat handwriting sat beside Pike's edits. Lines struck through, numbers doubled. Lies turned into chains. Her throat burned. "This is it," she whispered. Malachi took the book gently, wrapped it in his coat. "Then we're done. Time £800. From outside came the sharp ring of horseshoes on stone, hooves moving fast, too many to count. Pike's mouth twisted into a grin. "You might want to look lively," he said. "Sounds like Rusk brought the whole sermon." Malachi turned to the window. Torchlight flickered down the street. 6 riders closing in. He looked at Clara. "Back door," he said. She hesitated, clutching the ledger to her chest. "If we lose this, we won't," he said. "Now run." They slipped out the rear door into the narrow lane. The rain had returned, soft but cold. Behind them, the saloon filled with the echo of boots and shouted orders. Malachi pulled her behind the water barrels. They crouched low as the riders thundered past, torches hissing in the wet. One peeled off, circling back. Clara's pulse hammered in her throat. Malachi leaned close, voice barely a breath. "You trust me?" She nodded. "Then when I say go, you go." The horseman stopped in front of the alley, light sweeping over the mud. Malachi's hand brushed the revolver grip again, not out of fear, but resolve. The torchlight paused, then moved on. "Go," he whispered. They ran, boots splashing through puddles, the night swallowing them whole. And behind, through the sound of rain, Pike's voice rose in fury, half terror, half truth. "They found the books!" The words carried across the street, loud enough for the sheriff to hear. Malachi didn't look back, but Clara did. And in that moment she saw Sheriff Keller step from the shadows, expression caught between fear and guilt. He knew. The rain turned to mist by dawn. Wayfarer lay hushed, streets empty except for dogs, and the drip of water from awnings. Smoke curled from the chimneys, mixing with the fog until you couldn't tell one from the other. Malachi and Clara slipped through the alley behind the old freight office. The ledger was wrapped in oilcloth, tied tight against his chest. Every few steps, Clara looked back, expecting hoofbeats or a shout. None came. Not yet. "We can't stay in town," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but we need one more truth before we leave." They turned the corner and stopped short. Ezek Pike stood by the back door of the Blue Lantern, coat soaked, hat in hand. He looked smaller than before, pale in the morning light. "You left the door open for us?" Malachi asked. Pike nodded once. "Sheriff Keller's gone to fetch Rusk. You've got less than an hour before hell rides through that gate. If you want to end this, you end it now." Clara stepped forward. "Why help us?" "Because I'm tired," Pike said, "and because I've been a coward. Long enough." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "Letter for the judge. Confession. Names. Everything. Sent it last night." Clara stared. "You did that?" He gave a crooked grin. "Even sinners like to sleep sometimes." Malachi studied him, unreadable. "Where's the safe?" "Office floorboard. Under the rug. I'll keep watch. Just be quick." Inside, the Blue Lantern smelled of stale smoke and blood memory. The same wooden platform still stood near the center, dark stains where the rain had blown in through broken glass. Clara's breath hitched when she saw it again. Malachi placed a hand on her shoulder, brief and steady. "It's just wood," he said. It can't touch you anymore. She nodded and moved on. The office was small, walls lined with ledgers. The rug was worn thin in the middle. Malachi knelt, pried up the board, and there it was. A black iron safe, brass dial shining faintly in the half-light. Clara crouched beside him. Her fingers trembled as she spun the dial. May 1268. The lock clicked, a soft, final sound. The door creaked open, revealing 2 books, one wrapped in red cloth, the real one, and another bound in cracked brown leather, pages uneven and yellowed. Clara reached for the brown one. Inside were names, debts, falsified signatures. The ink bled where whiskey had been spilled, but the truth was still legible. Malachi looked over her shoulder. How many? Dozens. Not just me. She flipped pages fast, tears burning behind her eyes. Widows, ranch hands, even the preacher's wife. He owned them all. From outside came Pike's voice, sharp. Riders! Malachi shut the safe. Take the books, he said. We've got to move. They ran through the saloon toward the rear door. Pike was already at the threshold, pistol drawn, face pale as the fog. They're coming fast, he said. You've got maybe a minute. Clara looked at him. Come with us. He shook his head. I started this rot. Best I end it here. The first bullets shattered the front windows. Pike fired twice in answer, then turned to Malachi. Get her clear! Malachi grabbed Clara's arm and pulled her into the alley. Glass rained down behind them. The horses' screams echoed through the street. They cut between buildings, mud splashing to their knees. Behind them, the blue lantern caught flame. Someone had thrown a torch through the window. Smoke rose fast, black and bitter. They didn't stop running until they reached the far end of town, where the dry creek cut a shallow line through the grass. There they turned. The saloon burned like judgment itself, flames licking the sky. Clara pressed a hand to her mouth. He stayed in there. He chose to, Malachi said, voice rough. Some men only find peace when they face what they made. She nodded, tears cutting lines through the soot on her face. Then he found it. Malachi looked at the horizon. Now we find ours. From behind them came the faint toll of the church bell, slow, uncertain. Maybe warning, maybe mourning. Clara opened the ledger. The firelight from the town reflected off the ink, like blood. This is enough to ruin Rusk, she said. Enough to free every person he's ever trapped. Malachi met her eyes. Then we don't run. You mean, I mean we go back, but not alone. Time 900s. The wind shifted, carrying smoke and the echo of distant shouting. Somewhere in the haze, a figure rode out of the flames. Sheriff Keller, coat torn, face gray with ash. Malachi raised his rifle, but Clara caught his arm. Wait! The sheriff slowed, raising one hand. He's coming, Keller said hoarsely. Rusk, Half his men dead. He'll kill the rest of us if we don't stop him now. Clara's breath caught. Then help us. Keller looked at her, shame hollowing his eyes. I'm not sure I deserve to. Malachi lowered the rifle. You don't have to deserve it. Just do it. The sheriff nodded once. Judge Lockridge is on his way. I sent word after you left. If you can hold till he arrives. He didn't finish. They could already hear hoofbeats again. Heavy. Certain. The sound of vengeance closing in. Malachi checked the rifle chamber, calm and deliberate. Then we'll hold, he said, long enough for the law to see daylight. By noon, the smoke from the blue lantern had drifted clear across the basin. The town looked smaller beneath it, like something holding its breath. Out on the edge of Main Street, a line of wagons had been pulled across the road. Thick wheels locked, mules still hitched, their ears flicking in the sun. Doc Whitman stood on one side of the barricade, coat rolled up, pistol in hand. Reverend North knelt beside him, reading a prayer from a weathered book. Every sound, the rattle of harness, the creak of wood, carried through the heat like thunder waiting to fall. Malachi and Clara rode in slow, dust clinging to their coats. Sheriff Keller met them halfway, face drawn tight, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. He's less than an hour out, Keller said. 6 men left with him, the rest scattered when Pike's fire caught. Malachi nodded. And the judge? Coming from the South Ridge. He'll see smoke before he sees reason. Clara dismounted, clutching the ledger to her chest. Then we make sure reason's still standing when he gets here. The sheriff looked at her, a flicker of respect softening his voice. You're braver than most men I know. I'm just tired, she said. And tired people stop running. They began to set the line, wagons side by side, gaps filled with barrels of sand. Children were sent indoors, shutters drawn. The church bell rang once, long and low. May Witt, the town's midwife, appeared with her sleeves rolled. You'll be needin' hands, she said, and a doctor if this goes wrong. Doc Whitman grunted. You're looking at him. No, May said sharply, planting herself beside Clara. I meant me. Malachi allowed himself the smallest smile. Then we're not alone after all. The sound reached them before the riders appeared. Hoofbeats pounding steady, cruel as drums. Dust rose behind them, sunlight catching on the barrels of rifles. Rusk Harlan rode at the front, coat torn, face streaked with ash and pride. His grin was wide and wrong. Well, he called out, voice carrying across the open street. Seems I arrived just in time for the sermon. Drop your weapons, Harlan, Keller shouted. It's over. Rusk laughed. It's over when I say. He glanced toward Clara, sitting tall, beside the wagons. You run a long way for a girl who never learned her place. Malachi stepped forward. Her place ain't for you to name. Rusk's grin tightened. You still think this is about her? You made it about you the moment you outbid me. He spurred his horse closer, gun resting across his saddle. You've got something that belongs to me. Malachi's voice was steady. All I got's the truth. You want it. Come take it. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the first shot cracked. A warning, not a wound. The wagon wheels shuddered, splinters flying. Clara didn't flinch. She opened the ledger, holding it high. Every lie you ever told lives in here, Rusk. Every stolen dollar, every name you bled dry. You can shoot me, but you can't bury this. Rusk's face darkened, rage settling deep. That book dies with you. Malachi stepped in front of her. Then it dies with me, too. Doc Whitman shouted, Judge's riders coming in from the south! Rusk turned, caught between fury and fear. For a second, the mask slipped. He saw the wagons, the armed townsfolk, the sheriff standing beside the same man he'd once paid. And he understood. He'd lost the town before the fight ever started. Cowards, he yelled. All of you, hiding behind a preacher and a farmer. Reverend North closed his Bible. No, son. We're hiding behind what's right. Rusk's hand twitched toward his gun, but Malachi didn't move. The silence stretched thin as wire. Then, far down the road, came the clear sound of a bugle. Judge Lockridge's men rode hard into view, banners whipping in the heat. Rusk's grin fell away. You think a judge scares me? No, Malachi said softly, but the truth will. Rusk raised his revolver. Then let's see who it finds first. He fired. The bullet struck the wagon rim, shattering wood, spinning dust. Clara ducked low. Malachi didn't flinch. He fired once, not to kill, but to cut the strap on Rusk's holster. The gun clattered to the ground. The judge's riders surrounded them within seconds. Rusk cursed, fighting, but his horse reared, throwing him hard into the dirt. When the dust cleared, Sheriff Keller stepped forward, his badge catching the sun. You're under arrest, Harlan, for fraud, assault, and attempted murder. Rusk spat blood. You'll hang for siding with him, Keller. The sheriff holstered his weapon. Maybe, but not today. Clara stepped closer, voice trembling but sure. You can't buy your way out anymore. Rusk looked up at her, eyes burning like something already broken. You think that book saves you? No, she said quietly. It saves everyone after me. The judge dismounted, taking the ledger from her hands. He flipped through it once, nodded. This is more than enough. Malachi exhaled, slow, the tension easing from his shoulders. Rusk was hauled to his feet, cursing the whole way. The crowd that had gathered began to murmur, not in fear this time, but in something like relief. Clara looked at Malachi, eyes wet, voice barely a whisper. It's over. He nodded. For him. But as the judge's men led Rusk away, the sky began to darken again. Thunder rolling far beyond the ridge, the kind of sound that said peace was never permanent, only borrowed. Malachi looked out toward the horizon, jaw tight. We'll see if the law holds longer than the storm. The courthouse couldn't hold them all. So they moved the hearing outside. Someone dragged the judge's table beneath the cottonwoods, laid 2 barrels under it for legs. The whole town gathered in a loose circle. Farmers, miners, women with shawls pulled tight, children clinging to skirts. It wasn't just a trial. It was confession and reckoning both. Judge Lockridge sat at the center, coat off, sleeves rolled, the dust of the road still on his boots. His voice carried quiet authority. "Bring him forward." Two deputies shoved Rusk Harlan ahead. His wrists were bound, his face swollen from the fall. He still managed that grin, the one that promised trouble. Beside the judge stood Sheriff Keller, stiff and silent. And just beyond the wagon line, Malachi and Clara waited together. The morning light made the ledger's worn cover gleam like old brass. Lockridge nodded to Clara. "Miss Wynne, you said this book contains the evidence of false debts and coercion." Her fingers tightened on the cover. "Yes, sir. I kept the accounts myself until I realized half of them were lies." "Show the court." Clara opened the ledger. Her handwriting was clean, careful, the numbers straight. Then came the darker ink, Pike's scrawl, figures doubled and names forged. She read aloud. Each line another stone lifted from a grave. When she reached the entry for her own name, her voice faltered. "Owed. $120 for room and board," she read, "though I never lived there. Signed." She stopped, staring at the forged signature. "By my father. 3 years after he was buried." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Judge Lockridge looked to Rusk. "You deny this?" Rusk smirked. "Paper lies easier than people." Lockridge turned the page. "And yet here's your mark beside every false entry. You bled this town through that saloon, Mr. Harlan." The judge gestured for the next witness. Sheriff Keller stepped forward, face pale. "I signed off on those debts," he said hoarsely. "Didn't check the ledgers. I took his word because I owed him money myself. I was wrong." The words hung heavy, honest. Keller's badge gleamed dull in the sun. "If you'll have me stripped of it, I won't argue." Lockridge's expression softened. "You just earned it back. Time 900 pmem." Rusk barked a laugh, ugly and hollow. "You think this changes anything? I own half this land." Malachi stepped closer. "Not anymore." Rusk turned on him. "You think they'll follow a black man with dirt under his nails?" The crowd stiffened, but Malachi's voice stayed low, calm. "They'll follow the truth. Color don't change that." Something cracked in the air. Not wood, but the tension holding everyone's breath. For a moment, Rusk's arrogance faltered. He looked around and saw faces that no longer feared him. Judge Lockridge closed the ledger. "By the power vested in this territory, I order your holdings seized, your accounts frozen, and your freedom revoked until a full trial in Fort Laramie." Rusk spat into the dirt. "You're all fools. The world don't stay clean for long." "Maybe not," the judge said, "but it starts somewhere." The deputies dragged Rusk away. The crowd parted silently. As the horses moved off, thunder rolled far away, deep and steady, like the land itself exhaling. Clara stood still, watching the dust settle. "It's done," she whispered. Malachi nodded. "Almost." Lockridge turned to them. You two started this. The town won't forget. Clara smiled faintly. Neither will we. The judge packed his papers, tipped his hat, and rode out, leaving the town in the hush that follows storm and truth alike. People began to disperse, slow, quiet, not speaking, but lighter somehow. Reverend North shook Malachi's hand. You did what the law forgot how to. Malachi looked toward the ridge where the sky broke open in streaks of gold. The law remembered, he said softly. It just needed witnesses. Clara touched his arm. You kept your promise. He looked at her, eyes soft, voice barely a murmur. So did you. They stood that way for a long time, while the wind scattered the last of the dust. Behind them, the cottonwoods whispered, like a benediction. Far off, a hawk circled once, then disappeared into the light. By early autumn, Wayfarer smelled of rain and wood smoke instead of blood. The blue lantern was gone, its ashes scattered over the creek, where the wind carried them downstream. What rose in its place was quieter, a schoolhouse half-built, and behind it, rows of young birch trees planted by hands that had seen too much loss. Malachi leaned on his shovel, watching Clara tamp down soil around the last sapling. Her dress was plain, sleeves rolled to the elbows, the blue ribbon tied above her wrist to keep it clean. You think they'll take root? He asked. She looked up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. They will. Birch always finds light, even in poor soil. He smiled faintly. Sounds like someone I know. The breeze moved through the leaves, making a sound like a whisper too soft to keep. Clara straightened, dusting her hands on her skirt. You still don't sleep much, do you? Some nights, he said. Mostly I listen to the wind and wonder what it remembers. You ever think about leaving? He shook his head. A man can spend his life running from ghosts and still end up at their doorstep. Better to let them sit a while. She didn't answer. The silence between them was full, but not heavy. Out beyond the valley, clouds piled high like slow-moving mountains. The air carried the scent of new growth, wet bark, turned earth, a hint of pine. After a while, Clara spoke again. I've been thinking of opening a small school here. The widows, the girls, they deserve to read the truth in their own words. Malachi nodded. I'll build the benches. Her smile was quiet, the kind that didn't need to reach her lips to feel real. You'd do that? Wood's honest work, he said softly, keeps my hands from remembering. She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't have to. By afternoon, the last of the birches stood in a neat line along the fence. The valley looked almost new. Though the old scars of fire and rain still marked the land, they no longer owned it. Clara tied the ribbon from her wrist onto one of the young trees. The blue shone against the white bark, like sky caught in wood. Malachi watched her, the quiet in his chest no longer hollow, but alive. Eliza liked birches, he said softly. Clara turned to him, eyes gentle. Tell me about her. He hesitated, then sat down on the low fence rail. She was stubborn, kind, believed the land forgave easier than people. Was she right? He thought a moment. Maybe, but you proved something she didn't live long enough to see. What's that? That people can forgive too, if someone shows them how. Clara looked down at the blue ribbon, the way it fluttered in the wind. It used to remind me of shame, she said. Now it feels more like a promise. Malachi nodded slowly. It's both. That's what makes it worth keeping. They sat there as the day cooled, the light turning honey-colored, stretching long shadows across the field. Somewhere a bell rang. Not warning, not mourning, just time passing. You ever think about starting over? She asked quietly. He met her eyes. Maybe I already did. For the first time, she didn't look away. The silence stretched between them, not as distance, but as peace. A gust of wind swept down the valley, shaking the birch leaves till they shimmered like silver coins. The ribbon danced among them, twisting light into color. And though neither spoke it, both knew. The land, the trees, the quiet. All of it was healing them in ways no words could name. The storm came soft that night, without thunder, without warning. Just the steady whisper of rain moving through the birch leaves, finding every crack in the roof, every hollow place in the earth. Malachi stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching the drops darken the dirt road that wound away from Hollow Vale. Inside, the fire burned low. Clara moved quietly, closing the shutters, setting out 2 cups. The sound of rain filled the silences between them. You always watch the rain like it's got something to say, she said. He half smiled. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it tells you what it's washing away. She stepped closer to the open door, looking out into the gray. The birch trees shivered under the downpour, silver bark glinting like old coins. The blue ribbon on the nearest branch fluttered wildly, the knot holding firm. Do you ever wish you could forget everything before this? She asked. Malachi shook his head. Forgetting's easy. Remembering without hurting. Now that's work worth doing. She leaned against the post beside him. The smell of wet wood and soil rose like memory. You think the land remembers? Every inch of it, he said softly. It just forgives quicker than we do. The wind changed, sending a fine spray across the porch. Clara laughed once. Quiet, unguarded. You'll get soaked. I've been through worse kinds of weather. He turned to her then, his face half lit by the glow from the fire behind them. When I found you on that platform, he said, I thought I was saving you. Truth is, you might have saved me instead. Clara looked at him, eyes glistening with something that wasn't just rain. You gave me back my name, she whispered. That's saving enough. For a long moment, they just stood there, the rain falling steady around them. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of cloth. Eliza's handkerchief, edges worn smooth. She left this behind, Clara said. I found it in the drawer when I was cleaning. Malachi took it carefully, fingers tracing the stitched initials. She always said it was for tears she hadn't cried yet. Then maybe it's mine now, Clara said. He hesitated, then pressed the cloth into her hand. Keep it. She'd want it that way. The rain softened, turning to mist. The birch leaves shimmered like small stars. Clara stood close enough that he could feel her warmth through the damp air. If he comes back, she murmured. If any of them come back. He shook his head. Then we stand again, same as before. Only now they'll know what they're fighting against. She smiled faintly. And what's that? He looked out at the field, where the young birches bowed under the rain but didn't break. Something that doesn't quit when it's hurt. They fell silent again. The storm eased, leaving only the hush of dripping leaves and the faint hiss of the fire. Malachi reached for her hand. Rough against soft, strong against uncertain. She didn't pull away. The wind shifted once more, carrying the scent of wet grass and something clean, something new. Clara leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. You think peace ever lasts? She asked. He smiled, eyes still on the rain. Long enough to remember what it feels like. For a while they stayed like that. Two silhouettes against the soft gray dawn, listening to the rhythm of a world beginning again. When the first light broke over the valley, the rain turned to silver mist. The birches gleamed, alive and trembling. On the far fence line, a lone rider paused, watching. Then he turned his horse and disappeared down the road without a word. Clara saw him go but said nothing. Malachi whispered, almost to himself, Every storm leaves something growing behind. She looked up at him, smiling through the tears she didn't hide this time. Then maybe it's our turn to grow. He took her hand again. The sky cleared slow, sunlight spreading over the wet earth. And in that still, golden silence, neither of them felt alone anymore. In a world that too often rushes past what truly matters, the story of the most beautiful virgin at auction, a black rancher risked all to save her, reminds us that kindness, courage, and redemption never grow old. Malachi and Clara's journey through pain and forgiveness speaks to something timeless. The belief that even after heartbreak, people can still find their way back to gentleness. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear what part moved you most. Was it the courage to stand up against cruelty? The quiet strength of compassion? Or the way two souls, broken in different ways, learn to heal together under a western sky? Your stories and reflections matter here. So please, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you felt, what you remembered, or what you've learned from a lifetime of weathering your own storms. If you enjoyed spending this quiet moment out on the open range with us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you'll never miss another Western tale about love, courage, and second chances, from our campfire to yours. Thank you for listening, for remembering, and for still believing in the power of good hearts.